All right, let's do Honeyland.
Yeah, I've been wanting to talk with you about this one since I watched it. So spoilers for
Spoilers.
Honeyland and anything we might mention within it. Honeyland is
Yeah,
a documentary from last year, the year before, I think
it
last year.
says
And it was one of
2019.
your favorite movies of 2019 and you had me watch it. Do you want to describe it?
I will describe it. Uh, the movie is about. Let me get her. Hatice Muratova. I think you actually only ever get her first name in the movie. Hatice. She is a beekeeper, a Macedonian beekeeper, and she. It's it's kind of a. It's not really a fly on the wall documentary, but it's just about her and her life, and specifically this one part of her life where there really isn't anybody left in her town. Some well, I don't know what the actual correct term for this group is, but aren't they Roma?
They're nomads. I think Roma
Nomads.
is not a is an
Not a
offensive
good term.
term at
An
this
offensive term.
point. I'm not sure, but I hear them referred to as nomads.
My apologies if I used the wrong term. I'm
Or it
learning.
might refer to a very specific people, one of those
Yeah,
things, and we're not sure.
we're not sure. They're nomads. They travel into her little village area. Um, they become friends with her. They learn that she keeps bees, and so they start to keep bees. And you can already see where this is going. Problems and chaos ensue. They mess up stuff for her life, and spoilers. I mean, this is a documentary, so it doesn't like have a big finale. But they end up leaving, and her bees get messed up. So I think she ends up without honey for like a season or something. And all the while, Teeds is also taking care of her mom, who's much older and has some sort of problem with her eye. And eventually, her mother dies. And I think they filmed over the course of
Years, like 3 years or
years.
4 years.
Yeah, where is the conception and development? They had 400 hours of footage, so they started in 2015. So they stayed there for days at a time before getting supplies and stuff. So yeah, so like it was several years, many days out of the week. And yeah, it came out last year. It was popular for a number of critics, and that's more or less the story.
And you really liked it.
I really liked it. I wouldn't say I had thoughts on it. I didn't have big thoughts on it. I read the review you sent me, so I won't say anything about it. I'll let you go first. But I hadn't, for the record, I hadn't really thought of some of the things I had and hadn't thought about some of the things in the review. But go ahead.
Yeah, so let me talk for a while. So I started watching this, and about after the nomads show up, for a little while, I started getting uncomfortable, which seems to be today's word. And I couldn't really completely put my finger on why. But it had to do a lot with the editing. And I was like, every time we see Hadith, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. I apologize. It's quiet. It's peaceful. She's singing. She's saving bees from the water. She later saves a turtle from a dry well area. It's very quiet. Every time we see the nomad family, it's noisy. The kids are screaming. The camera's moving around. The mom's yelling. The dad's yelling. And it kind of bothered me. And I was like, why are you being so bothered? But I kind of, I looked at the Wikipedia to be like, because I had forgotten if this was a documentary or not. And it is a documentary. But I came across under conception and development, the interesting statement, according to Kodevska, who is one of the creators of it, virtually none of the films seen are fictional. Virtually none? So, like, maybe one or two are? And so that made me uncomfortable. And it may be that none of them are fictional, but it just is an odd phrasing and it's Wikipedia. So take it with a boulder of salt. And then as I was trying to really figure out what I felt about this movie, I came across, they don't want to give it to me. I came across, there it is, New Yorker review by Richard Brody, which he was kind of harder on it than I ultimately would be, but I think it solidified my feelings about this documentary. And that is that it is way too much like a film for my taste. The narrative flow of this documentary is like a naturalistic film, the
Yeah.
way it's edited. They had 400 hours of it. And so it uses dramatic narrative and it uses traditional editing of film, of a fictional film.
Yeah.
Documentaries are films too. So I should say of fictional,
Yeah.
films. And I don't like that, as it turns out, because, and he has his own things to say, and I may be repeating him somewhat, but it really, two things happened. I'm going to go for two things happened. One is it makes me not trust what I'm seeing because my brain is interpreting it like a fictional film. And I'm like, so did it really happen that way? And I have no doubt that this is all footage that they obtained. But again, the stuff with the family is so specifically jarring and loud and all over the place. And the stuff with her is so peaceful and calm and quiet that I'm sure it could be true. It could, I mean, there are horrible people out there. One of the animations I had you watch was called Neighbors, and it's about neighbors fighting about things. Like, neighbors fighting is not a new concept, and it's possible for one of the neighbors to be wrong. Like, it may not be there are good people on both sides. It may actually be that one of the sides is bad.
Yes.
And one
False.
is
False.
good.
There's no false equivalencies.
But also, I mean, it means they chose a point of view, and I was reading about that, and it's like this film is about ecological disaster and when you don't really respect nature kind of a thing, but you could have made this about poverty and they didn't. They didn't really. There's some sympathy for the nomad family for being poor and how are you supposed to, he's just trying to take care of all his kids and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that's not really the point of view of the film.
Yeah.
So I don't doubt that everything, like, despite that Wikipedia statement, everything could be true. But it made my viewing experience kind of like doubtful. And the other problem is that what happens with biopics, where I feel like it is simplified. And you and I have talked about documentaries, and one of the things we like when documentaries do is just tell its story. We know it's not the full story because you can't tell the full story. We know you have a point of view, so on. But my favorite documentaries are like Shirkers and Searching for Sugar Man. And they tell a story, but there are interviews. There is text on screen. I forget the one we saw even in 2019 that was all about South Africa and the politician, right? Hammarskjöld.
Oh, Cold Case Hammarskjöld.
Yeah, like that one, at the end of it, you're not even sure how much of what you saw was real.
Yeah.
But it was done in such a way that you were aware of that. Like, you see the seams. You see.
I wonder if that's intentional or not, but.
And with Hammarskjöld, I think so. I'd have to look it up, but I remember the documentarian is kind of known almost for doing kind of is it or isn't it stuff. But you see that. Both Searching for Sugar Man for sure recreates things with animation so that you see that this is a story.
Yeah.
Honeyland is naturalistic. So there's no interviews. There's no text on screen. I have no idea when things are happening. I have no idea how far apart they're happening. I have no idea where they are, except in things they say. She seems to have friends and people who know her in this one section, yet she seems alone for the rest of it. And so it made me feel like they were editing things out, and the way it was telling the story made it feel smaller. It made it feel too neat. And orderly. And even though I like it when Shirkers and Searching for Sugar Man and Hammarskjöld are clearly telling a story, there's something messier about it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't like that. At the end of the day, though, I do want the massive caveat that I think Honeyland was up for an Oscar or won the Oscar. I am fine with that. It is impressive, it's well done, and all that. But it really made me realize I don't want my documentaries to look like Roma, which is the name of the movie, and not.
Yes. Well, so two things. One, I looked it up. I couldn't find anything that said Roma was a bad turn. It's the Romani people but it's who knows.
But I think that's a specific group of people which these people may not belong to.
Right. You're right that these
there
people
are lots
probably
of, I mean, there are Irish nomadic people. There's lots of nomadic people in different places.
So the other thing, so I was actually going to bring up Roma. So you like, one of your favorite movies is Grey Gardens.
Yes.
And this, like Grey Gardens, is a fly on the wall style documentary. It's cinema verite.
Right.
Which is an important term for us because we made a joke out of it for the name for Pigeon Verite. And I think you make an interesting point, and I don't think I disagree or anything with your point. I just think it is a bit, this feels like it's a personal thing for you. Like, but the thing, I want to compare Grey Gardens to Honeyland because Grey Gardens doesn't have a narrative really. It's a couple, like a year or something, or a year or two out of these people's lives. The scenes are kind of just cut together. I think you see a couple Thanksgivings or something. It's not like there's, I don't know, it's not like there's, the character grows this way or the story grows this way. It's stuff put next to each other. There's kind of, you can build themes and a narrative out of it, but it's not really structured that way.
Right.
Honeyland is structured like a real Hollywood narrative, like a more traditional story.
Right.
Now, I can see why that doesn't work for you, because with a fly on the wall style documentary, both because we're trained this way and also maybe because of of culture, of our brains, whatever, it's weird that it has such a strong narrative when really you almost want to just see scenes cut next to each other of this person's life. Like that structure, I think, is better suited for fly on the wall than a strict narrative like Honeyland has. And Roma, the movie, not the people, Roma, one of the complaints people gave it, and this didn't bother me and I didn't agree, I understand the complaint, but I guess I didn't agree with it. I don't know. Is it's kind of too big and too well shot and too grand for the story it's telling. Like people wanted it to be a little smaller. Cat. And
she was being grand and big, but she's a very small cat.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's a cat walking outside my window. We have an old cat that wanders by. Anyways, and so there was this disassociation between the technique and the story. And Honeyland, I think, has the same thing as far as you're concerned. And I get that. And that's what Richard Brody, is that what his name is? Look up his name.
Yeah, Richard Brody, yes. The New York Times, not New York Times, New Yorker.
Yeah.
Critic.
Yeah, and like I get that. And because of that, because it's so strong a narrative, you end up with questions of like, well, if this is like this in the narrative, what happened here? Yeah. We never really know how many people are in the town, and because it's a stronger narrative, you almost want to see the city or the village, or I don't know what you would even call it, the place where Hatice lives. You want to see how many people are there. Or the mom has obviously received some kind of medical attention. I mean, she's got something wrong with her eye. Probably a doctor was brought up there at some point. So like, when did that happen? What's going on there? So,
or even just the admission that it's messy. Like, I don't need the facts, but it was so neat that it's almost like,
yeah,
these things don't exist. And it's like, but I think they might.
Yes.
Like, I can't tell.
And so I think that I get the critique, and I might even agree with it a little more than I thought I did. But as somebody who I watch more documentaries, I think, out of the two of us.
Yes, you do. I'm going to give you that.
I find documentaries really interesting because I have this whole thing, and I finally won you over to the point that, it's all subjective.
Right.
And people like to pretend, in particular, I mean, whether or not people believe that for like critique of a film, like this film is objectively bad, which I think is a stupid phrase. I'm sorry if that's what you believe. We can believe different things.
It's fine.
Documentaries, more often, people like to try and say, well, this is objective. This is objective fact.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so two things to that. One, anything is capable of lying. I am 7 foot tall. Two, once you point your camera in a direction, it is subjective.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. So with a documentary, and there have been some famous documentaries over the years that people have gone back at and been like, "Ooh, this is a lie." And you talked about Cold Case Hammarskjöld, where like we're not even really sure how true or not it is, but it is interesting and it does really get you in your brain. Like, or King of Kong, like something like that, where like a lot of people watch that and like, oh, this other guy's a dick, and then it's come out that like, well, they were kind of portraying him really poorly, and maybe he's a bit of a arrogant guy, but maybe not. So like, there's that kind of stuff, and it's like because of that, when they turned this into a narrative, my brain almost stops thinking of it in terms of a documentary. This is one narrative for Hatid's life. Oh God, Luna monster! Because of the size of the screen, it's like Godzilla is coming after you. So like I stopped. So like the fact that it's so fictional doesn't bother me because that's how I've always thought of documentaries. And no documentary do I go into without at some point a question during it being like, well, what information are you leaving me without? Like even the Atomic Cafe, which is a documentary that probably nobody has seen. I think I saw it in school.
It's semi-famous. I think people have seen it. Yeah.
I feel like it's like
documentaries. Luna has not seen it though.
Luna's like right at the mic too.
I want you to know that Luna wants treats right now, and Luna is fine. Luna does not need to have treats right now. She is fine. She's very okay.
So like, but like even in that, like that's just clips put next to each other, and it's the Kuleshov effect where like here's a nuclear explosion, and here's Truman smiling before talking about it, and like anything, because of how you cut the clips next to each other, it gives you a certain feeling. It's that same thing where like you watch reality TV and like you can't see them talking, but you hear the audio, and you're like, well, did that really audio go with that clip? Probably not. So like it's all of that stuff. Like it doesn't bother me so much that even though this is fly on the wall style, it is a narrative, but I still get the critique, and it's made me think more.
Yeah, because I agree with you, and I have always I think it's important to say though that there is at the same time there is a difference between propaganda and someone who's trying to show more than one side at a time. Like there are ways of being more objective. I want to say you can never be totally objective, but there's I mean you can take a clip and play different music behind it,
and that does something
to elicit a different emotional reaction. And there's definitely stuff you can do that's more I don't know, and I'm talking about nonfiction, I'm not talking about fiction, but there's definitely stuff you can do that's more sinister, and you definitely see it in the true crime world all the time, where it's like you're not saying this guy is evil, but you're playing this music underneath him that makes him seem evil. So anyway, so there's still degrees of that too. It's different when you make, Lenny Riefenstahl's type stuff versus,
Well, I've never watched some of that stuff, but I need to watch some of that. But no, there's something Mom's talked about, and this gets a bit into politics, but there's something called the fairness doctrine, which used to be a part of news where you had to present both sides. And at some point, I guess that went away. And so various programs get to choose how much or not they do that. And there's no obligation in nonfiction or in fiction to do that. And often the movies we like more in fiction, I think, tend to present multiple sides to an issue, or multiple sides to a character, or a character grappling with multiple sides of an issue. We don't tend to like this is black and white, here's the good person doing the good thing. Not always. I mean, life, it's complicated. But so in a nonfiction documentary, I get like, what was Blackfish or whatever that one was about the whales? Like a lot of people, I no longer really enjoy seeing animals on screen doing things unless they're cats and dogs, basically. Because at this point, cats and dogs are domesticated, and it's been thousands of years. And as far as I understand it, that bridge was crossed.
Well, and you're talking about when they are performing on screen.
Yeah, like monkeys, lions.
You don't get upset when you see a cow on screen.
Damn that cow. No, but like you see a monkey performing, or a lion performing, or a whale, or an elephant, or something. So I get kind of, so like watching, where was I going with this? I was doing the fairness doctrine. Somewhere in there, my brain lost a step. I missed what happened. Oh God, we're on air.
Point of views.
Point of views.
Oh God.
Oh God, and the cat keeps distracting
Well,
me.
I mean, you want me to go what I was going to say, except now I'm
Sure,
starting
go.
to forget.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying, and I personally am aware. And it's not even like I'm worried that other people will see Honeyland and think it's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Personally, I like seeing the seams. I like seeing dates on screen if it's a documentary. Not if it's
Dawson Cities is nothing but text and dates.
Yeah, like I like if I'm gonna want a documentary, I want it to be like a nonfiction book with pictures and dates and stuff like that. And so it's not that I'm worried that people will see Honeyland and think that there's no bias in it. It's that I want to see the seams, as I keep saying.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I just didn't like Honeyland as much as you did.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I saw it. So
I remembered what I was going to say. I go on tangents because that's just who I am and I can't help it. Blackfish was a documentary that felt like very one-sided, and like
right.
I don't disagree with, like, I ultimately agree with, like, hey, we shouldn't have whales in captivity anymore, despite how fun they seem to be for people to watch.
Yeah.
Like, watch a nature documentary or something.
Mhm.
I appreciate, I might agree with the message, but not necessarily the way it's told. So
Mhm.
like Honeyland, I can understand having a kind of problem with in that way. It doesn't exactly show multiple sides of an issue. We haven't actually talked about the substance of the documentary. We've talked about like all the stuff around it, the meta stuff. I do want to, just before we move on, like, Hatice is a fascinating person.
Yes.
I don't know, where she is. I assume she's still now keeping bees and doing her thing.
The filmmakers did, if you read up on it, I get a little confused, but they helped her move. I don't know if she's still doing bees or not, but they did get involved, and in an open way. Like they made sure, like there were press releases about it, and
that
so
is
on.
super common in documentary work. Like almost like people should be making documentaries to get enough money to help people. Like it's hard.
Well,
I mean, documentaries don't make money.
Dark Days is the one that Kirby introduced me to, that I introduced you to, and I think that's one of your favorites, right?
It's one of my favorites.
Where the documentary crew just blatantly got involved, and it was about homeless people living in some abandoned and not abandoned subway.
I think it's not even homeless anymore. I mean, we were talking about Rome earlier. I think it's now like people without homes or something. It's not homelessness.
Yeah.
So, but no, Dark Days, that's, I think, on Criterion. I think actually Dawson City is also on Criterion. Here's a plug for both of those. You should go watch those people. They're good.
Right.
But no, and Hatice, it's also interesting to see Hatice interacting with the people in the city where she goes to sell the honey. Like, it seems like she knows a few of them, and like they kind of, they know each other, and like they understand that she's got good honey. But it's all deals. But then there's also like a local or a nearby like festival or something that happens, and like she goes and she like talks to people there, like people she knows. And there's this like younger woman who's like super excited to see her, as I recall.
Yeah.
Like a friend of hers, and it's like Hatice there's an aspect to the movie that I didn't want to forget, where like we talk about how like sometimes like Wonder Woman, or maybe not Wonder Woman, like you get these like women are superhero movies where they're kicking butt and stuff.
Yeah.
They're girl bosses or whatever. And you get to this point where you're like, it just starts to all feel like advertising. It doesn't feel very honest. Like Charlize Theron.
But it's also that thing where it's like women are strong when they do traditionally male things. And it's like, okay, thanks for that.
There's that, or there's like, Charlize Theron kicking somebody's butt makes sense because she's a tall, strong woman.
Right.
But then you see, what's her name?
Oh, I got really uncomfortable when I saw Nicole Kidman beating people up, because I'm like Nicole Kidman size, and it's unlikely. It's really unlikely.
Yeah, it's really unlikely. Like, or you see somebody like fighting, you see a man and woman fighting, except the woman is fighting like the man would. And I'm like, there's a size difference there. Like a small man would not fight a large man the same way a large man is going to fight.
Well, it's like when Baby Yoda, or not Baby Yoda, when old Yoda fights with a lightsaber. Red Letter Media has a whole thing on like, that doesn't make sense. Like,
so like there's all of that stuff, whereas like Hatice to me is almost like the real life version of like a woman who's kicking ass. Like it's a really, she keeps bees, she's of strong opinion. You can kind of tell she she maybe seems a little stuck in her ways. If I knew her in real life, maybe it would be one of those things where she's too old world for me. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, like I just appreciate seeing like a real superhero narrative almost.
Yeah.
So like that's another aspect to this I didn't want to miss because like
No. It's
she's a
worth seeing
woman.
for I mean, you and I have talked about documentaries that aren't very well put together, where it's
Yeah.
just the subject makes it worth watching, even though we don't think it's necessarily an interesting film. And
Yeah.
this isn't like badly put together. This isn't that. But I mean, in the sense of like its subject makes it worth seeing for sure. I
Totally.
agree with you on that.
Totally. So yeah, good documentary.
Yeah, and it was really, really heartbreaking when they cut down the tree with the bees in it. That was like, that
Yeah.
was the worst. That was
Yeah.
terrible.
There's a lot of that in there where
So yeah, despite what I'm not offering is like reasons that this movie is bad. In fact, it kind of frustrates me when I read critics articles on movies where it seems like people are just going through hoops to prove that something's bad instead of just saying like, here's something you can see in this. And I think that's just kind of society demands. We want our aggregator to come up with the percentage chance that we will or won't like this movie. But so I'm not doing that. That this isn't why this movie is bad. It's you should see it if you're,
yeah,
you know, it's worth seeing. It's just
I loved it.
I went through this whole experience of like, why am I kind of not into this? And
Yeah.
figuring out why was kind of
See,
interesting.
this is one of those moments where like what was it? Sometimes I'm watching something and I'm like, you know, it just I'm sure it's a good movie, but I can't figure it out. It's one
Yeah.
of those moments, except it's you doing it.
Well, and I figured out why, because
Well, yeah, because you figure it out quicker than me. You're smarter than me.
oh no.